Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's been a couple of weeks since NGS released, and what I wanted to do today was go through a Q&A for the last 2 weeks. Of course, I probably won't do this every 2 weeks. I'll probably do this every week or so. The more questions you all have, the more I'll try and answer. I have answered some of these in other forms or more specific videos, but I figured, hey, this is a great way to just kind of centralize all of the big questions that I've received over the last couple of weeks. Not all of them. So once again, if you have a question, especially one that wasn't answered in one of my previous videos or just want more information or clarity on, this video would be the perfect place to leave a comment. I'll use this video to then go through and see, okay, what are some good questions that I have either answered or have not answered for the next Q&A session for the following week. And then we'll see how things go from there. Once again, I also want to call out, I appreciate all the subscriptions. Really, this channel has been active since, let's say, the end of the global beta. So that's back in May 16th. So I definitely appreciate all the support. Fortunately, once I hit, I believe, 1,000 subscribers, a lot of things begin to open up, specifically community options. So things like questions, so on and so forth, I don't necessarily have to make a video for, or at least I can interact with you all a little bit more seamlessly. I appreciate you watching my videos, but I feel like some of the content doesn't always require video, and sometimes I definitely like to get more of your feedback. So being able to have polls and answer questions and things of that nature, definitely going to use that once I hit that level. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of my subscribers, but of course, all of those who stop by and watch the channel haven't subscribed yet. Hopefully, as time goes by, I'll get that subscription. But anyway, let's get on with the questions. Of course, all of these questions will be listed in the timestamp so you can jump back and forth. First question, is wand tech and or melee? So I get this question a lot, and we're going to go through not only is wand a tech or melee weapon, but also go through how you can determine what weapon damage type it belongs to. So yes, wand is a tech weapon. So no matter if you're doing physical attacks or your melee strikes, no matter if you're hitting with the wand or casting techniques, you will always be doing tech damage. How can you tell the damage type of the weapon? Very easily. You'll notice right here, this is my wand partisan, or excuse me, this is my partisan wand, and this is my wand wired lance. But what you'll notice is that wired lance and partisan have an orange color on their weapon icon, while my wand has a yellow color. You'll also notice that my talus also has yellow. This is the visual indication of which weapon is which. So when you see yellow, that means it's a technique weapon, and it requires technique affixes. If it's a blue weapon, it is a ranged weapon. It requires range or shooting affixes and augments. If it's orange, it requires melee, which gets confusing, but melee or strike augments. So that's a simple way of looking at it. I've got a lot of questions about wand, but also a few questions about wired lance, because technically, yes, it is a ranged melee weapon. So is it ranged or is it melee? And it is melee. As you can see, the icon is orange. Next, speaking of multi-weapons, how do they work? So let's start at the item lab. First, after you've completed the story up to a certain point, there will be a quest that allows you to do multi-weapons. From there, you'll open up the multi-weapon, and you'll be able to choose which weapons you want to multi. Now, of course, the first thing you have to understand about multi-weapons is that they have to be of the same rarity. So if you notice, I'm looking at this Suvia wire. It is 2-star, which means that I can only multi-weapon with a weapon of the same series and the same rarity. So this Suvia can be multi-weaponed with the Suvia dagger. It cannot be multi-weaponed with the Tersis launcher. Why? Because A, it's a different name. B, it's a different rarity. But once you find two weapons that you want to multi-weapon, so I'll just show you would select the weapon that you wanted to be your base weapon, and I'll get into why the base weapon can be important, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And then the dagger. And then from there on out, if you have the materials and the resources, you would just press OK, and you would have a Suvia wire and dagger. Of course, I can also do this with the wand. Next, let's say that I've completed that multi-weapon, and now I want to assign actions to that multi-weapon. What you would do is you would go into equipment, you would select equip weapons, and then similar how you do your other photon arts or actions, I have my wand actions here, I have my wired lance actions here. And I can put any of these on the weapon. I can also put them on my sub palette. So now I've gotten a few questions of exactly how multi-weapons work and how do I actually use them. It's very similar to how you might put, one weapon's skills either on your sub palette or on your palette. So in a multi-weapon, it works the same way. Next, multi-weapon affixing. How do affixes work? So to start, a multi-weapon Even though the base weapon in this case is a partisan, it is a partisan wand. And as far as the game is concerned, it doesn't really care about order. The only thing that matters about the base weapon in a multi-weapon is things like preset abilities. So you'll see my partisan, it has a fixa attack level 3. The reason I chose this as the base weapon is because the wand at the time, which was the Resurge wand, did not have a preset ability. So this was the stronger, more beneficial weapon. Now, of course, when you multi-weapon, everything takes on the stats of the base weapon. So everything will get the flickered form 3, which is the weapon potential, and the fixa attack. With that said, affixing is different. Affixing still subscribes to what is the damage type of that weapon. So for orange, it's going to be melee affixes. For yellow, it's going to be tech affixes. So for instance, how I have my weapon set up, I have damage variance from Doll Soul 2. Damage variance just increases the minimum damage that I do in that damage variability formulation, but it benefits both weapons. Strike and tech damage from Air Note C. The strike 1% benefits the partisan. The tech 1% benefits the wand. Strike will not benefit wand, and tech will not benefit partisan. They still subscribe to their weapon damage. So when you are affixing your multi-weapon, you have to make a decision if your two weapons have different damage types. If they have the same damage type, then you would just go into that damage type. So for instance, if I had a partisan wired lance, I could just go melee all the way because they're both melee or strike weapons. But when you are doing multi-weapons of different damage types, you have decisions to make. For my partisan wand, I wanted to make sure that both the partisan and the wand had equal affixed power. Now for my wand and wired lance, I'm less concerned with my wire lance damage because I'm using it as a weapon action, and more concerned with just making sure that my wand damage, that technique damage, is as strong as possible. Still keeping on with multi-weapons, another question I get asked a lot, does the order of my multi-weapon matter? And what that means is, does it matter that my base weapon is a spear versus a wand? Am I going to lose anything? Other than the fact that one of the weapons might be stronger, such as my partisan had fixa attack 3 and my wand did not, no. The game does not care the order of the weapon. And it gets a little tricky just because you see partisan as the base weapon, but at the end of the day, it doesn't care. Even though partisan is the main weapon, if I were to remove hunter from my skill class, let's say force, I'll lose the weapon because my force is level 5. But let's change Techer to my main class. My partisan can still be equipped. Even though the base weapon is partisan, it is a partisan wand. And so the game treats it as both. And because it's a wand and because I'm a Tector, I can equip the weapon. No issues. The order does not matter. Now, with that said, there are main class weapon bonuses. What that means is that right now, I am Tector. Wands and Taluses, when I use them, will get an additional 10% damage bonus, regardless of anything else. All I have to do is have the main class. The Partisan will not. Now, if I were to switch back to Hunter, the Partisan will get that 10% damage bonus, but the Wand and the Talus will not. The order of your multi-weapon does not matter. Remember, the game treats your multi-weapon, whether it's Partisan and Wand or Wand and Partisan, as the same. So once again, other than which weapon is stronger or which weapon do you not want to lose when you multi-weapon, because remember, the sub-weapon of your multi-weapon essentially gets eaten. So that's really the decision you want to make. Hey, do I want to keep this Partisan? Do I want to potentially use it for something else, or is it just stronger? Maybe I don't want to get rid of that because Fixa 3 is hard to come by. But this wand can be a throwaway. So those are the things to think about, but once again, order does not matter. Now, another question I've gotten a lot, can I use just one weapon? Or do I need to multi-weapon? Now, this one is interesting, and right now, it really comes down to it depends. If we look at the 4-star series weapons, right now, the Cat series is technically, from a stat standpoint, the strongest weapon. The problem with the Cat series is that it has very limited multi-weapon functionality. Unlike the Resurge that I use, I cannot do Partisan Wand with the Cat series. I can only do it with the Resurge series at series or rarity 4. Yes, you can use one weapon, and if you wanted to do that, chances are you're going to go with the Cat if Cat has your weapon for the weapon series. But really it comes down to it depends. There are some weapons that, like Wand, it's very, very helpful to multi-weapon it, just because Wand is a very close range weapon. It doesn't have a lot of range unless you're using techs. So if you were going to want to main wand and not use Talus, which does give you some range, even though there's some issues with it from time to time, having a multi-weapon like a wand wire lance can be helpful. Now, is that for every weapon? Not necessarily, and I can't speak to every weapon because I have not played with them yet. But just something to think about. Can you play this game right now with just one weapon? Yes. Can you play this game in the future as the item rarities increase with one weapon? Probably. But it's the understanding that there's a lot of utility and versatility that you could be losing. And that right now it might not be as important or as a big deal. And there's a lot of, old PSO2 players who are using their PSO2 gear right now. And so they're not using multi-weapons. But it is something in the future, regardless of when that future will be, that you want to start considering multi-weapons. Now, staying on the topic of multi-weapons, and I guess this is really going to be a multi-weapon heavy Q&A, wand element. Now, for those who may not know, wand element is a Tector skill. So when you've learned this skill, essentially what it says is whenever you use a charge technique, your tech explosions will change to match the attribute of that technique. Wand only. So what this means is, say if I charge Foyer, the fire technique, my wand will now be imbued with fire, and I can do additional fire damage because there is a elemental weakness piece to it, but also the burn down status effect if the enemy is also weak to fire. But of course the question is, does this carry over to other weapons in a multi-weapon? So for instance, my wand wired lance. If I charge fire, my wand is now fire. Will my wired lance get that element as well? And the answer is no, because as you saw in the skill, it reads wand only. And this is what we get into what is called weapon skills. So when you are reading your class skills, or just any class skill in general, pay close attention to when they say wand only. Be close attention to when they say hunter weapons only, or even more specifically, sword only, wired lance only, partisan only. What this means is that these skills, even though they're not main class dependent, you can use them whether they're subclass or main class, that they require that weapon and that only that weapon. So that if you try to use something with another weapon, you will not get that benefit. So, I get a lot of questions of, hey, can I use this or I can use that? Make sure when you're reading the skills, when it means wired lance only, it means that it will only have that effect. One of the greatest examples is, Volk Raptor. Essentially, and Volk Raptor is kind of actually bugged to a sense to where when you use this move, it will only record the damage done by partisans. And there's a little bit of a bug to where if you use wands, it might actually invalidate the entire move outright. So you might use Volk Raptor, hit with a wand and hit with a partisan, and nothing will happen. And of course, sometimes nothing will happen regardless. So just wanted to cover that because wand element is a weapon skill specifically to wand, and it does not have carryover. And the same rules apply to all of the other weapon skills. So when you're thinking about your subclasses, when you're thinking about the weapons you want to use and how you want to use them, pay close attention to these weapon only skills, because if you don't take that into consideration, it might mess up what you're trying to do, especially given how multi-weapons are expensive. And now finishing up kind of in our weapon series, preset abilities. Now fix the attack, I talked about this a little bit, but I get a lot of questions about preset abilities and how exactly they work. So right now, and of course this could always change in the future, but right now, preset abilities such as Fixa Attack, and Fixa Attack is, it increases my weapon 4%. And of course, once again, in a multi-weapon, both the partisan and the wand get that 4% damage. But anyway, these are RNG based. This happens when you kill an enemy and it drops the item. It has a chance of dropping a preset ability between levels 1 through 5. When you get this preset ability on a weapon or a unit, it stays with that weapon no matter what. So if you get a level 1, it will be preset ability level 1 the entire time you have the weapon. If it's level 5, it's level 5. Nothing can change that. So if you upgrade your unit or if you upgrade your weapon, it will not jeopardize your preset. If you add abilities or if you release the potential, it will not jeopardize your preset. This stays with the weapon and does not change for its entire lifespan. When you multi-weapon, as long as the weapon with the preset is the base, you will not lose the preset. So this is very, very important when you're thinking about what you want to multi-weapon. If one has a preset and the other doesn't, or one has a better preset that suits your build or just suits what you're trying to do in general, use that weapon and don't worry about losing anything. The same thing goes with when you combine multi-weapons. The base weapon becomes the main weapon. So any affixes and any resources from that sub-weapon when you multi-weapon do not carry over. So that's another thing to think about. Basically, don't put any resources into your sub weapon, but protect that base weapon as much as possible, and everything is good from there. I also get a lot of questions regarding my weapon camouflage. So what do I mean by that? So I'm using the Resurge weapon, but I have my graph still camo. Okay, this is what Resurge looks like base. But I have weapon camo. I got these weapon camos from a long time ago from PSO2. They carry over. There is a bug, because I get a lot of questions, not a lot of questions, but I have gotten a few questions of why I don't use the same camo for wand and partisan, because I can't. This Thor's hammer works for both. But right now, there's either a bug or this is how they intended it, but they're treating weapon camos like an item. And so when I equip this item to my partisan, it is technically unavailable for my wand. So if you're ever wondering why can't I use the same camo, that's because either it's bugged and it's not recognizing it, not allowing it. I think it is a bug because I could technically equip the Thor's hammer to both partisan and wand, but only one would show up, or they're treating it as one item. And so just wanted to call attention to that, just in case you're wondering what's going on and why sometimes I'm using different camos. But figured I'd call that out, and we'll see if that changes in the future, if they fix some things or if this is how they intended. One of the more recent ones, and I covered this in its own video, but status effects. I think it's important to cover here, just in case you didn't see that video, you can check it out later. Just search status effect in my channel. But essentially how status effects work is different than how they worked in PSO2. In PSO2, they were percent chance based. You had a chance to inflict a status effect with any attack that could cause a status, whether that's freeze, poison, burn, shock, so on and so forth. In NGS, enemies don't necessarily have percent chance. They have what I'm referring to as thresholds and units. And now units is an arbitrary term, but it's just something, the simplicity I can speak to. But essentially, enemies have unit thresholds. Let's say an enemy can be frozen. Instead of it being you have a 2% chance to freeze the enemy has a threshold of 55 units of ice. Different ice attacks, or in the case of Tector, different wand attacks that have the wand element ice, deal different amounts of units. So let's say wand does 1 unit of ice per hit. You will need to hit the enemy 50 times to reach that 50 unit threshold to cause a freeze. So there is no technically random freeze chance or status effect chance. You can now control it as long as you understand where that threshold is and when you want to hit it. Now there's also discussion and talk that after you've frozen an enemy, or if you actually status an enemy, whatever that status effect is, that enemy will now gain a 50% resistance to that status. So let's say that the enemy has a 50 unit threshold of ice before they're frozen. After I have frozen them, they now have resistance, potentially 50%. So instead of my wand strikes doing 1 unit of ice, they now do 0.5. And so you can imagine sometimes you don't want to freeze enemies because maybe their weak spot isn't exposed. And so you want to save your ability to freeze them until you can do optimal damage. Another question I got after discussing status effects was, can players be hit with status effects? And the reason I got this question is because there's a couple of skills in the Ranger skill tree that right now don't seem like they have a lot of value. And that would be bad condition resist and bad condition reduce. What these skills do, and these are subclass skills, so you don't have to be the main class Ranger, is that they reduce not only your chance of getting a status effect, but they also reduce the duration. So unlike enemies, it does appear that when we as the player receive status effects, it is based on a percent chance. I might have a 20% chance of being frozen from this enemy. And so what these skills do from the Ranger tree is reduce that percent chance. So instead of saying I've got a 20% chance, now I have a 10% chance. But even if I am frozen, it also reduces the duration. So what does that mean? That means that, let's say, freeze lasts for 10 seconds. So if I get frozen, I'm going to be frozen for 10 seconds. Bad condition reduce, that reduces, let's say that's 50%, that reduces 10 seconds to 5 seconds. So are these important? I would say yes. Are they important right now? Not so much. I would say status effects are possible. You can be burned, you can be frozen, you can be shocked. And I've heard from a couple of my subscribers in the comments, you can also be confused. There's some enemies that can confuse you. And for those not familiar, confusion is when your controls essentially get reversed in some random order. These are not common, but I can imagine as the game progresses, as difficulty increases, this could be a problem and these skills could be more valuable. So that's one thing to keep an eye out for, is that some of these skills, specifically the status skills, and also potentially even Volcraptor, their true potential might not be showing because they're going to scale with the game. So that's just something to keep in mind. Speaking of statuses and abilities, Barta, Blot, and Zonde Clad, do they stack? Now, what do I mean by that is we are currently looking at the Force skill tree that has Barta, Blot, and Zonde Clad, but so does Detector skill tree. And one of the questions I see a lot and I've gotten a few times is, can I stack these abilities? So if I'm Tector Force or if I'm Force Tector, can I put Barta, Blot, and Zonde Clad on both trees and get them to stack? And the answer to that is no. The best way to think about these two abilities is that the techniques Barta and Zonde already have that mechanic built in to the techniques themselves. What these skills essentially do is flip a switch saying that now as Tector or now as Force, you have the ability to access this mechanic. So in stacking them, all you're telling the game is that you flip the trigger twice, or you flip the switch twice, but all that matters is once you flip the switch, you have access to it. So if you're going to be Force Tector or Tector Force and you want to use Barta, Blot, or Zonde Clad, what you want to do is understand which is the skill tree that has the spare skill points, which is the skill tree that's not very dependent on your build. And you want to put Barta, Blot, and Zonde Clad onto that tree. So let's say that I'm really Tector focused. I'm really just using Force for, PP convert and killing PP gain. I've got extra points. This is where you would put Barta, Blot, and Zonde Clad. And to a degree, you might also use the Talus skills here as well, so that you don't have to waste skill points on your main class tree because you want to do other things. And to make sure we don't go too long, the last question is, will I ever stream? And that's a great question. And the answer is yes. I did a little streaming back during the global beta. If you check out the playlist, there's actually a stream playlist. Really just to kind of get my feet wet, see how it went, understand things and what I needed to do and think about in the future. And definitely will plan on streaming later on. YouTube channel is probably where I'm going to do streaming, even though I know YouTube is not the streaming station. Twitch is. But given the fact that I'm focusing, not solely, but primarily on my YouTube channel, I'm going to start there and give it a shot. The reason I don't do it now is because content creation gets kind of tricky. And one of the things I've seen from a lot of content creators, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that needs to be understood, is that to grow and build your brand, streaming's not necessarily going to do it, And I can attest to this. I think when I first started streaming during the closed beta, I had as many as 4, maybe 5 audience members or watchers. And I would say that's probably high for someone starting up. I really anticipated not getting any viewers or maybe 1 to 2. And so as I'm thinking about trying to grow this channel and connect with you all, where is the best opportunity? And that's probably through content creation, through producing videos that are informative like this, and building up. And so what I really wanted to do was build that community and then start segueing into streaming, especially when the game kind of levels out and we kind of get to more, not necessarily smaller updates, but where we've gotten all of our information, updates aren't as frequent, and now I can connect with you all on streaming. So definitely planning on streaming in the future. To be honest, I didn't anticipate the support that you all have provided me and growing so quickly in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I didn't think I'd have over 800 subscribers in 6 months, even actually a year. So definitely things have kind of moved more quickly than I anticipated. I had planned on streaming maybe at the end of the year or maybe a year from later after I'd built things up, but definitely putting all of that into perspective and thoughts, and we'll probably be moving the time forward. So definitely I'll let you all know when I start streaming, once I get a better handle of things and how I need to balance things. And of course, if there's any suggestions, please let me know. So I want to end this Q&A, make sure it doesn't get too long. Once again, I appreciate all the support. I know I couldn't get to all of your questions, and there's a lot of questions that go on, so definitely it would help me out for the next one if you left your questions in this video. Of course, I'm not just going to look at this video for all of the questions, but definitely going to use this as a primary source, and we will go from there. So once again, thank you all, and I'll see you next time.